Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us as is very is here with us today to discuss with you both the fact that May is Mental Health Awareness Month and also to talk a little bit about the issue of suicide. But we begin as a county. We last met on April 29th. Since that time, there have tragically been 13 additional deaths that were non-suicide overdose deaths. And they've occurred, as is always the case, in a number of communities, 9 communities across the county. And one of the concerns, and we've made some progress in addition to the tremendous strides we had initially made relative to reducing numbers here, we have for the last few months made strides, even small ones here, in addressing the dramatic increase we'd seen during the pandemic. This 13 that we've experienced this month is concerning because for the first time this year puts us ahead of where we were last year at this time. Never a good place to be. And, you know, as always, when we talk about these numbers, it's a way we measure how our work is affecting the community. But we know that even one of these deaths impacts just such an enormous number of people and is really too many. And I want to think about, and we talked a little bit about this last month, obviously the great increase we're seeing in the number of people with co-occurring disorders, and particularly around mental health issues. I want to think for a little bit, and statistics can kind of numb you in terms of the numbers sometimes seem so big and so difficult. But I want to talk just about a couple of things that have come out from the National Council on Mental Well-Being, because I think they are numbers that are really striking. In 2020, 1 in 5 adults in the United States, which comes out to almost 53 million people. So 1 in 5. I mean, just think about your circles. Think about the number of people you know and what that means statistically. Were experiencing a mental illness. And then at the same time, in the same period in 2020, 40 million people over the age of 12. So beginning at the age of 12, there were 40 million people in the United States who had a substance use disorder. So when you look at that 53 million with a mental illness, 40 million with a substance use disorder, and we know from that that fully 1/3 of those people have a co-occurring substance use disorder and a mental health disorder. And it's not really surprising when you take that into consideration that we are seeing that suicide has now become the second leading cause of death in people between the ages of 10 and 34. And we are seeing it across the age spectrum, but it is particularly concentrated in that 10 to 34. And if some of you saw the other day, the 60 Minutes did a presentation on mental health issues in kids, talking to kids as young as 9 about their, in most cases, very serious attempts at suicide. And really think about sort of where we want to concentrate our efforts, what we're looking at. And the other part, and this is particularly startling with respect to kids, is that 54% of people in the United States with a mental illness are not receiving treatment. 54% we know have a mental illness and they are not getting treatment. And that is particularly true with kids. We've all read the stories about the delays, the lack of resources for kids in the Commonwealth and across the country. So in addition, before I turn it over to our presenters, I want to remind you that in addition to responding to the unattended deaths that results from an overdose, the troopers in our office respond to an unattended death where someone may have died by suicide as well. And sometimes it's very clear that that's what's happened. Sometimes there's a no, the person has given things away in the last few days, has made suicidal statements to friends or families. But in others, it is a case where that diagnosis is really made based on the circumstances or the assessment that there is no other cause. But so our numbers are not as complete because we only see where the person dies immediately. They don't linger in a hospital for some period of time. They don't not die. They're dying in our county. So for instance, somebody who there's been a death by suicide who's taken to the Mass General, we won't necessarily see that because they're dying in a place outside of our county. But we did put together for you our numbers because they give you some real time look at that. And Nora's going to run that slideshow for us, which will show you those numbers, hopefully.
Yep. They're running. Does everybody, can people see them?
Okay, I can't see them on mine, but in 2021, we had 32 people die by suicide across our communities in the 5-month period from January to May. And this year, that number is unfortunately in the same neighborhood. In that same time period, we have 25 individuals who have died by suicide. And you can see the communities and the numbers. Cambridge is concerning, obviously. We've had 6 incidents in Cambridge, and as well, the 2022 community. And again, you see Cambridge and Marlborough are in the city died by suicide. One of the things that's particularly concerning to me is the number of women we are seeing. That number used to be incredibly low. It's one of the places that I am not at all happy to see women gaining equality in numbers. You'll also see that hanging has become really the number one thing that we are seeing. That is a real change, and as well the gender piece. So women making up just about 50% this year. And a pretty wide range of other methods. The train strikes, they're having had 2 by train strike. And those are things that, in addition to obviously the terrible loss of life caused, when we really talk about trauma, lots of that in terms of the folks on the train and responding to those. So that gives you some sense of what we've been seeing here in Middlesex. Anybody have any particular questions or comments about those numbers or what we've been seeing or what you've been seeing? All right, seeing none. I'm delighted to have our first presenter with us today. Senator Joan Lovely is in her 5th term as senator for the 2nd Essex District, which comprises Beverly, Danvers, Peabody, Salem, and Topsfield. And Senator Lovely has been serving in that position since January of 2013. She now serves in leadership as the Assistant Majority Leader and Chair of the Senate Committee on Rules. And outside of that committee work, Senator Lovely is the Senate Chair of the Massachusetts Caucus of Women Legislators. And really importantly, and she's been incredibly active on the Ellen Story Commission on postpartum depression. They had an event just, I believe it was last week on that. She's a member of the Special Senate Committee on Opioid Addiction, Prevention, Treatment, and Recovery Options. I've had the privilege of working with Senator Lovely on a couple of commissions, always dealing with women and children and people really struggling in our communities. So certainly her district is incredibly well represented. Her work has really set the standard in so many of these areas. And I'm really grateful to her for joining us today. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, DA Ryan. I'm so pleased to be here today. And, I want to give some credit back to former Senate President Therese Murray, because when I came into the Senate in 2013, she put me as the chair of mental health and substance abuse, as it was called then, substance use disorder now. And I'm so grateful to her for doing that. I have to tell you, I was like a deer in the headlights back then. I had no policy background, no professional background or education in it. And I learned so much from being chair that session. And this has become one of my top policy areas. So I want to thank her for guiding me into this area. I also want to acknowledge the NAN project who is here, Jake Kavanaugh, who will be speaking. Jake and his mom came into my office several terms ago with this idea of the NAN project and how to do this peer-to-peer counseling, which Jake will get into. And I latched right on. I just said, yes, this is exactly the area that we need to go. And this is one of my top budget priorities. It actually just went with the Chair Ways and Means yesterday. On this particular budget priority, which we will get to see funded again this year, this next budget cycle for FY23. So just really pleased to be partnering closely with the NAM project and continuing to support them for the work that they're doing. They're now in dozens and dozens of high schools. Department of Higher Ed has reached out to them to start doing this programming at the college level because of the sheer need. And so let me talk a little bit about what we've done in the budget, in addition to the NAN project, to be able to support all these organizations that, like many professionals and clinicians who are here today, that we support your work. In FY22, oh, and just one more thing, this is an absolute priority of the Senate President to enhance our mental and behavioral health services. She talks to us all the time about this on both a policy level, but also on a personal level. She reminds the Senate to please take care of ourselves and our families. Take some time, take a walk. If you're struggling, reach out for help. And it's after every meeting, every caucus, those are her parting remarks. I couldn't be more grateful. So the FY22 budget, which we are in currently and we're closing out on at the end of June, we put in hundreds of millions of dollars in spending for mental and behavioral health supports. We also did an ARPA spending package that provided even more, $400 million more in spending for mental health. And again, the FY23 budget that Senate will take up next week will be another vehicle for additional spending, and it is in there. Because again, we recognize the need. We know that the isolation of the last few years, especially when we were all in lockdown, what has been incredibly difficult, especially for our young people, for our youth. That's a group that's been hardest hit. And that's where, again, how NAN helps with this peer-to-peer training and counseling at that level. We've been able to, again, secure funding for NAN, and we're going to do it again. And it's just such a great role model. And again, expanding into schools. We also filed legislation this session for suicide prevention policy in our schools. It's S1303. And it would require all schools serving grades 7 to 12 to adopt a policy on student suicide prevention. DESE would be required, that's the Department of Education and Secondary Education, of Elementary and Secondary Education, would be required to develop a model policy for schools. And what we would want to see included is to increase awareness of the relationship between suicide and suicide risk factors, including substance use, child abuse, neglect, and trauma, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, including child sexual abuse, stressful life events that young people are experiencing, and then suicide clusters, previous suicide attempts, and a family history of suicide or attempted suicide. We want to identify training opportunities in recognizing suicide risk and referral procedures that may be available to the school employees to deploy. And using the expertise of school employees who have been trained in recognizing suicide risk and referral procedures. We want to train school employees on how to respond to suspicion, concerns, or warning signs. Also training on how to respond in a crisis situation where a student is in imminent danger to himself or herself. Establish policies and protocols for communication with parents so that parents are notified and obviously involved. Counseling services within the school for students. We're seeing a lack of clinicians in the workforce. We hear from a lot of behavioral and mental health services organizations that are just so trying to get more clinicians, again, because of the need. So we want to actually be able to deploy these right in the school system itself as well. And then make information concerning crisis intervention, suicide prevention, and mental health services available to both the students, the families, and the school employees. So those are a few of the things that are in that bill. And we're hoping to get that bill passed. We're working with DESE now. For the second session in a row, the Senate passed a comprehensive mental health bill. It's the Mental Health ABC Act. This session is 2.0. Last session it was 1.0. We actually have been able to take it and update it and make it better. We passed that back in November of 2021. It is before the House. We hope, and the House, we understand, is taking up a mental health bill this session. So we're looking forward to seeing what they have included as well, so to make an even stronger bill. The bill establishes a suicide postvention task force dedicated to addressing the after effects of a confirmed suicide, and requires TPH to collect data on the physical location of the suicide and the number of known attempts made by the same person. We are data driven in the legislature. This really helps us to inform our policies. So the more data that we can have through our terrific state agencies, the better it is that we can make better law. We've also been working on some behavioral health initiatives that would contribute to our overall behavioral health system. And they're in 3 categories: addressing behavioral health workforce shortage that I just alluded to, emergency department boarding. We are still seeing boarding, especially of our young people in the EDs. At Beverly Hospital, they actually took their a training room, a good sized training room, and a lecture hall actually, and turned it into a dormitory style boarding for young people. So they're not literally on a gurney in a hallway in the ED. That's there again, speaks to the sheer need. And we have the beds. We don't have the clinicians at the bedside. At one point, we didn't have the beds. Now we have beds, but we don't have enough staff to staff those beds. So, and the third major category is prevention and access to treatment. And so we do want to be able to see this bill pass. We also, again, to kind of get people into the mental health profession, we in this bill, it has loan forgiveness for practitioners, and recruitment and retention enhancements as well for child and adolescent psychiatrists. That's allowed up to $300,000 per individual. We're trying to get, again, we're not seeing as many people that are going into the practice of medicine going into the practice of psychiatry. So we want to be able to enhance that so that we can get people into the psychiatry profession. That loan forgiveness is for all mental health professionals. We want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to be able to, again, go into these professions and get some help with that. We also included a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner fellowship program to recruit and retain psychiatric mental health NPs at our community health centers. And this bill really, as you can see, has quite a bit in it. And so I can make that available to all of the viewers today, but it really is a really good bill. We're hoping, again, that the House will release their bill soon, and then we can combine what they may have and really, again, come up with some good policy that really enhances and helps this profession. I want to talk quickly about ARPA spending. So we did a big kind of a 1.0 ARPA spending package last fall, and again, $5 million to establish an online portal to facilitate the coordination of services. So what would happen is someone would be, a clinician would be in the ED trying to find a bed, and they'd find a bed, and they would try to get that patient into the bed, and then the bed would be gone. So this portal would collect real-time data on those being boarded in emergency departments, so that in real time you find the bed and you are able to put that patient into that bed. And that just talks to, again, how difficult trying to place these again younger patients into a bed in a timely manner. We can't have children boarding in EDs for day after day, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months. It does happen. So we want to be able to make sure that we can get these young people especially into beds in a timely manner. I'm just scrolling through some of my information here. We also, in that ARPA package, included $1 million to launch a school-based behavioral health technical assistance center. We see that our school-based behavioral health services have been very successful. My district is fortunate to have have these services in several of our schools, and the students use them. The students go to these health centers, and it's of course confidential, and they have that opportunity to check in with the school health center on a daily basis. And we are hearing good success that these young people are availing themselves of these services right in their high schools. So we want to make sure that we continue to support and enhance these behavioral health centers again in our schools. And as the mental health crisis continues, we must do and we will do more to support our young people and get them access to care and supports that they need in real time. So again, I want to thank you, DA Ryan, for all your work, for this task force, for its work, to support our young people. We want to make sure that if someone is thinking about suicide, if they're having suicidal ideation, if they're feeling that they can't connect, if they're feeling that they're alone in this world, they're not. So again, I want to just say a huge thank you to the NAN project for going into our schools and teaching our students peer-to-peer what to look for and how to respond, because there was just actually a train strike near my home just a couple of weeks ago. It was a late Sunday afternoon, about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I heard the sirens. And I live a block away from a train bridge, so I walked up, and I looked down the tracks, and there was a train, and I stopped, and I said, "Oh gosh, I hope that's not a suicide." And it was. It was a young college student. She managed to get onto the tracks, and that was a suicide. And I just thought, I thought for her, I thought for her family, I thought for everyone on that train who experienced that as well, the trauma, but what was happening in her life, that she needed supports. And for whatever reason in her life, maybe she didn't know where to find them. And so I pray for her and her family. A beautiful girl. There was a beautiful picture of her in the paper just last week. And but it can happen. It can happen anywhere. So we want to be here to be able to support the good work that you're doing, DA, and the NAM project, and all of the clinicians and everyone who's on this on the task force and on this Zoom today. So thank you so very much for the opportunity. Please know you always have a strong partner in me. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, so much for that information, and thank you for the work. I know there are many, many legislative priorities right now as we try to, especially now as we try to get back on track, but you have been steadfast in putting these things at the front of your priority list, and people are truly, truly grateful. You've been a wonderful partner to us. And Hannah from your staff has been good enough to put the bill in the chat. So somebody was asking for that. Senate Bill 303 is in the chat. One question, Senator, that somebody put in the chat. Any thoughts about how to increase, and I know you and I have been in presentations where people talk about this, the need to get diversity in the mental health field. Any thoughts in addition to the loan forgiveness and things of how to do that?
Absolutely. We so need diversity in our medical field to encourage everyone and anyone who wants to go into this work to be able to encourage them and enhance those opportunities. So appreciate you bringing it up, and we will work on it in both the House and the Senate. I will raise that to make sure that we are being inclusive for anybody who would like to, again, be able to get into this work. So appreciate you raising it.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you again. We are
Um,
so well served by your work. Oh, I'm sorry, Nora. Did you have-
There's one question here about investment in universal early screening for mental health. Is-
I see the question. Yes, thank you. Again, let us look into that. I want to make sure that the bill may already contain it, and but if it doesn't, I want to make sure that the House bill. Let me reach over to our House colleagues as they are contemplating this. If it is missing for some reason, we still have another bite at the apple. Once this bill, once the House releases its bill, there's an amendment process that we would be able to amend it. So thank you to Deb Schmill who put this in. We will absolutely make sure that it's included, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to talk now with, as you heard, the NAN project, which we've been fortunate enough to hear from before. And Jake Kavanaugh is with us, who serves as the executive director of the project. Jake began this project in 2015 as a way to promote mental health awareness after his family experienced the loss of his sister Nan to suicide. And Jake works with a really amazing team providing education to students and educators around both the signs and the best responses to a young person who's struggling with a mental health challenge. They use a peer-to-peer model where young adults with lived experience tell the stories of recovery. And it's just, as with substance use disorder, it's just so important for people, especially people who may feel there's nowhere for them to go, to hear stories of hope and recovery. And with those conversations, the intent is to start conversations about mental health in the classroom. And Jake is joined today by John Joshua William Oxenford, who's been working with the NAN project as one of those peer mentors since August of 2020. He's pursuing that career as a peer counselor. He finds it very empowering to help young people who may be going through what he went through at their age, and hopes that they can hear his words, set their life on a healthier path. His two main hobbies and projects in life are fitness and music. He tries to incorporate reaching some of those goals in his activities every day. Acting was and may still be another huge part of John's life. He was inspired to make acting a professional goal when he began getting lead roles in school plays, was cast in professional plays as he took time off from school. And kudos to John. He just recently graduated from Bunker Hill Community College with an Associate of Arts degree in theater. He has been diagnosed with paranoia and schizophrenia. He struggled heavily with substance abuse before beginning recovery after his own suicide attempt, brought about, he believes, largely because of his substance use. In August of 2020, at the same time that John began his work with the NAN project, he transitioned from a group home to an apartment. And again, great kudos to him. He's been living a very independent lifestyle and getting lots of support to deal with his recovery. So we're really happy to have both John and Jake here today, and look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, DA Ryan. We appreciate the opportunity to speak again at the Opioid Task Force. I think we were last year about 4 years ago, and at that point we had been in around 20 to 22 schools all across Massachusetts. Now we're in that many schools just in Middlesex County. And a big part of that is the platform that you gave us. We had a lot of folks reach out after that. So we really do appreciate this opportunity. Also, Senator Lovely, she has been our champion since we started the NAM project in 2016. We first met with her. I know we still have a lot of work to go in Massachusetts, but we were just out at the American Association of Suicidology conference in Chicago. We got to speak to a lot of other groups that are doing similar work to what we do in different states. And we got to realize how lucky we are to have the support of our folks on Beacon Hill. The amount of funding that we get, the general atmosphere and the discussions around mental health that we're having in this state are far and above what most states can expect. So we are super grateful for that support. So I'd just like to talk a little bit about kind of the NAM project, where we came from, and then I'll get into what our model is. And then we get to hear from John, and John's really the star of the show today. It's our peer mentors who use their stories of lived experience, who use those real and vulnerable moments that they went through to start a conversation around mental health in high schools, middle schools, and now colleges across the Commonwealth. So I started the NAM project back in late 2015, early 2016. And I started it because in 2012, 10 years ago, I lost my little sister, Nan, to suicide. Nan had struggled from probably the age of 8 or 9 years old with OCD and later on depression and anxiety as well. But for a long time, I think it was because she was so young that we didn't associate mental health with someone who's still in 3rd or 4th grade. She went undiagnosed, and it wasn't until college that she finally received those diagnoses. But by that point, she'd really learned to cover up what she was struggling with. She didn't want her friends, her teammates, her coaches, teachers to know that she had these diagnoses. And that all goes back to the stigma that surrounds mental health. And so she hid it. And she put on a happy facade, and she did a good job at covering up what she was struggling with on the inside from all those around her. We all went to Hamilton Wenham High School up on the North Shore, and she got A's and B's throughout high school. She played on the soccer team all 4 years. She got the Spirit Award her senior year. So I think for most folks that interacted with Nan, her teammates, her classmates, they had no idea what she was struggling with on the inside. The flip side to that was that she was very resistant to reaching out for help. Again, she was trying to cover up what she was struggling with. She didn't want anyone to see this secret that she was trying to keep because of that stigma that surrounds mental health. And I think this is something that is way too common with so many young people, whether it's high school, middle school, college, and without asking for help, without being comfortable in your own shoes, reaching out for help, she wasn't getting the support. She wasn't getting the resources that we know are out there that can support someone who's struggling with a mental health challenge. So she wasn't going to a therapist regularly. She wasn't taking regular medication. She wasn't just learning the basic coping strategies that we know can help someone with depression or anxiety. And without that support, her mental health really declined. She moved out to Western Mass, got her undergrad degree at UMass Amherst, and then went to get her MSW at Westfield State. And 1 month before she was going to graduate is when she ended her life. For us as a family, for me as the older brother of that family, you do a lot of second guessing, a lot of wondering, what could we have done differently? How come we weren't there to support this person that we care about, that we love, that we know for 6-7 years had these mental health diagnoses? And in looking at my experience, I really felt like I wasn't educated around mental health. I wasn't educated around what are the signs of a young person who might be struggling. What do you do in that situation? What's some language you can use to engage someone who's struggling with mental health? And then what are the steps that you take? What are the resources that are out there that you can connect them to? And so in processing a lot of this loss, this grief in the years after Nan's death, my mother and I, we wanted to put together a program that could provide some of those answers and some of that support for other young people who might be in a similar situation to Nan, who might be uncomfortable in their own shoes and might be trying to cover up what they're struggling with because they don't feel comfortable talking about depression, or don't feel comfortable talking about their own anxiety and the struggles that they're going through. And what we came up with, we sat down with groups of teachers and parents and clinicians and pretty much anyone who would meet with us for about 6 months, did focus groups. What we came up with is a peer-to-peer model to get that conversation started in schools. And so what that looks like for the NAM project is we work with incredible young adults. We have about 15 or 20 young adults similar to John, who all have their own stories of struggle with depression, anxiety, substance use, sexual identity issues, all these things that most young people will come into contact with, will either struggle with themselves or have friends or loved ones that struggle with, but that are all too often swept under the carpet. And we help our young people talk about them from a place of strength, talk about what those struggles were like as a 14-year-old, as a 12-year-old. What did it mean to have depression or anxiety or just have difficulty getting out of bed every day and maybe not even understanding fully what that meant or what that was? But then really, what was the pivot point? Where were they able to reach out to a trusted adult? Who was that person that they could connect with? What were some of those supports that they were able to access? And what does that support system look like now? And then every story ends with a message of hope of, 6 years ago, I was sitting in your seat. I was struggling in math class, having a panic attack, didn't know what it was. But because that coach reached out to me or I connected to that guidance counselor, here's where I am now. I'm in college for the first time and never saw that happening. Or I've got that job I wanted, or in John's case, he'll talk about how he's living independently. And that is really the perspective that a lot of young people who are struggling need to see, need to experience. By having young adults presenting these stories, it creates that connection that me going into a classroom and talking to students and saying, here's what depression is, here's what you need to do. By having a young adult go in and say, here's my experience, here's what I went through, and here's what worked for me. It opens up a whole new door for conversation, for discussion around this otherwise stigmatized topic. So I'm going to let John present his story, and then I'll explain a little bit more about kind of what the program looks like when we're in the classrooms, when we're presenting to groups of students. But I really do want to focus on John's story because it is such a powerful story of his struggles with mental health and substance use. So John, I'm going to let you present now, and then you can take it away whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is John. I'm currently working for the NAM project as a peer mentor and recently graduated from Bunker Hill Community College with an Associates in the Arts and Theater. I've been acting for most of my life. I've been in a few plays, including The Boys of Winter at Boston Playwrights Theater and Romeo and Juliet in the New Art Theater in New Hampshire. I love going to the gym or jogging outside in Cambridge when the weather is good, as well as playing some heavy metal music on guitar or listening to bands like Tool, Metallica, Gojira, or Opeth. Someday I hope to have my own band to play with as I pursue my career in peer counseling. In high school, I started as defense and later midfield in Cambridge Ridge and Latin High School's soccer team, as well as getting some lead roles in school plays. Acting was becoming a huge part of my life, and with the support of my mom, I decided to make acting my professional goal. However, behind the scenes, I started experimenting in substance use to fit in with some other kids who did not have my best interests in mind. And that was when the problems really started for me. It led me to some dangerous behavior and would later get me in a lot of trouble. Before I started agreeing to commit to hospitalizations in order to find some medications that would later help me deal with mental illness, I got in trouble with the law a few times. I found those experiences to be depressing and symptom-provoking. I developed a mistrust and rebellious attitude towards authority, and my unchecked mental illness only increased that mentality. And that state of mind was really driven by my consistent use of substances. Substance use began in my freshman year of high school. It started as something I'd try every now and then, but slowly by my junior year, it became a habit I was doing all alone. It became a regular habit, and I hid what I was doing even from my mom, the person I care more about than anyone else in the world. School became less of a priority, and sometimes I was straight up skipping class. Eventually, the substance use, which started as something I'd done to socialize with other kids, became a habit I was doing all alone. And I became antisocial and stopped communicating with friends and family. Even as substance use was taking over my life, I still got a full scholarship to BU's acting program, something that since high school had been a dream of mine. However, due to my drinking and drug use during freshman year, my grades plummeted and I had to take a year off, but I didn't return. And this was a time where I really needed someone to reach out to me, to talk about my problems, to help me clean up my life and focus on my goals again. But I wasn't really in a place to accept any help because I didn't trust the adults in my life. I felt like they were trying to fit me into a certain archetype that I didn't want to follow. So using substances became a rebellion for me, an act of trying to become more in control, but ironically derailed my life, got me in trouble with the law, got me hospitalized many times, and took some valuable years away from my life that I could have otherwise used to put my life together in a way that I wanted. I now realize that drinking and drugs were really just a way I was coping with my own depression. During that time, I lost friendships and isolated myself, both of which only enhanced my depression. At its worst, I stopped taking care of my health and appearance and stopped communicating with friends, and was only communicating with my other through arguments, and stopped consistent engagement in things I love to do. I got so caught up in my own mind with so much negativity that eventually led to a suicide attempt. So I woke up in hospital after 3 weeks in intensive care and saw my mom waiting for me. I could barely walk or talk, and it took some time before I could recover enough to maintain a legitimate conversation and walk on my own 2 feet again. But during this time in hospital, I had 3 friends who came to visit me. Even my family from England came to see me at one point, and my mother was there visiting me every week. It gave me some perspective on the fact that there were actually people out there who wanted to see me healthy and alive, and who really loved me. I spent 6 months recovering in hospital, after which I worked with a social worker to find a more independent living situation, and after a set of years living in 2 group homes, I found my own apartment. During this process, I learned that recovery is an up and down battle, but having people there whom I knew cared about my health helped me never reach that place of depression again. The supports I have now are so important to my stability. My mother was there for me, even at my most negative of times when I was either barely talking to her or just ranting to her about my anger. She was there to help me then, and now I get help from her even still as she offers her wisdom, love, and knowledge that I now trust. Without her, I'm certain I would not be here today. I now have 2 social workers who help me with anything from getting the paperwork done for my recertification for my apartment to finding some good new music recording software. An essential element for me when dealing with my mental illness is having a psychiatric doctor and a therapist who really listened to me and understood my struggle. It's so important to find people who support you in your life. During my process of restarting my life, I began to engage in my previous personal hobbies, and I started all this gradually. I wasn't too harsh on myself if I wasn't perfect. Now I've got my medications all set, I'm exercising 5 to 7 days a week, I'm making new riffs on the guitar all the time, and I'm even taking lessons to learn the drums. I went back to school and earned my associates in theater at Bunker Hill, and find that the classes there helped me reconnect with my life as a theater actor again. I've been working with the NAM project for over a year now and find that it's given me a new path in reaching out to give help to those people who are going through what I went through so many years ago. It's given me a new ambition and a new healthy path to explore. Finding the correct medications for me really helped me stop substance use. It helped me be able to rely on something that could give me the state of mind I needed to stay stable, as well as get sufficient sleep, enjoy the day, and accomplish all my goals that for some reason I couldn't motivate myself to complete before. Additionally, having a more independent living situation and friends and family who've been with me throughout my most negative of times helped me feel loved. Also, having a psychiatric doctor and a therapist who really listened to me about my experience with my medications and the thoughts and feelings I was having gave me people in the healthcare profession who I could trust and who really listened to me about what I needed in my life. But if I could go back in time and speak to myself before I started substance use, I'd say to the younger me, you don't need substances. You don't need to change a thing. Learn to communicate with those adults who are trying to help you that you do need their help, but that you want to be in the driver's seat of what you do and who you become. I'm sure they would have more than understood and more than encouraged me to forge my own path. I want people who are going through a similar situation that I went through to understand that there is help and that there is hope for them too. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So you can see that story. It creates a space in the classroom where students can then sort of talk about mental health for the first time. So what it looks like when we are with students, we always do sort of classroom settings. We avoid the big auditorium style presentations. But we'll have myself or our clinical director go in and introduce the NAM project, talk a little bit about what we're doing, kind of go over some safety protocols, but then we'll turn it over to 2 or 3 of our peer mentors who will each present one of their stories of resilience and recovery. And the idea is to create that safe space. By being vulnerable, they create a space where students can then ask questions around mental health, can ask specific questions to the stories they just heard, or something that's been on their mind, but that they've been reluctant to ask in another setting. And then we make sure as part of that discussion that we cover the most common signs of depression. What do you do if you're concerned about a friend? How do you get them to a trusted adult? What do those trusted adults look like in your school community? And the goal really is to get kids talking about mental health before they get to that crisis point. We know there's backups with getting to psychiatrists, to finding a therapist. We know about the overcrowding at hospitals. But if we can get kids talking about mental health and kind of reaching out and connecting with resources before they're in crisis, before they're in that ED, we believe we can help them a lot more than trying to scramble at the last minute. So that's really the goal of the NAM project, to normalize this conversation around mental health. I'd like to pause for 1 second and see if you have any questions about our peer-to-peer model at this point. Yeah, Rita.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I don't have a question, but I do have a comment to address this to John Oxenford. I am so glad that you saved your life, and you saved your life through your mother. This is so amazing, and now you want to give back to others. I find with the Middlesex Sheriff's Office where I work that some of our best people here that deal with the homeless or deal with drug addiction, which we have people come in that are drug addicted. We try to get them in detox as well. These are the best people because they've been there and back, and they know firsthand what it's all about. So I commend you, and you almost brought me to tears because I saw someone that was ready to die and you turned your life around. How remarkable. And not only are you doing that, but you're helping someone else to do that as well. So I'm more than saluting you to say that you did a tremendous job, and God bless you. I wish you the best in everything you do. And just like you, Jake, you went through it through your sister, and it hurt you so much that you took all that sorrow and you turned it in to helping others. This is an amazing morning to hear this. And for you too, I'm just so grateful that there's people like you in this world. Thank you so much for saving lives. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Appreciate that. Yeah,
Jake,
and it really
Jake,
is
I
the
have-
peer mentors.
I have a quick question. When you talk about encouraging kids to talk, destigmatizing the issue and encouraging conversations, how do you address the fact that for some kids that may be incredibly triggering, and the making sure that they have the tools to hear what they might be hearing from a friend?
Right. So first off, in the presentations, all of our peer mentors go through pretty intensive training with us. And so all the stories are safe. We work a lot on the language, making sure they're safe both for the peer mentor to present, because it can be obviously very difficult to tell your own life story, but also for the audience, and make sure that it's age appropriate language that we're using. And when we're in the classroom, we always have either a guidance counselor, a social worker, a school support with us when we're in that classroom, so that if a student is overwhelmed, and it does happen, that there is someone there to walk them down to guidance and to do follow up. A lot of the schools that we work with, they'll do an exit ticket as we're doing our presentations, so that if a student does want to check in with someone that day or that week, they have a chance to write their name down and put it in there. We were in a school, actually in Middlesex County, and 10% of the students checked in and said they wanted to meet with a guidance counselor that week. And more than half those students weren't on anyone's radar. So that is part of the process. It's identifying those students who maybe no one really, they're the kids who are doing AP, or they're on the soccer team and they're sort of gliding by, and no one's really picking up on some of those signs that they are struggling with their mental health. I don't know if I answered your question there, but the idea is that students will come forward. Some students will come forward. So to provide another layer of support for students, we also do a lot of professional development for educators. We have a suicide prevention workshop that we offer to educators, counseling staff. Over the past year and a half, we've developed workshops around developing resilience for your students, which has just obviously become incredibly important due to the pandemic, as well as teacher self-care workshops, just because we're seeing such burnout amongst educators. And if they're not able to take care of themselves, they're not necessarily doing the best for the students. So we want to make sure that educators are also feeling equipped, feeling like they have someone supporting them as well. Another interesting piece that we've added, and we actually piloted in a town here in Middlesex, is law enforcement training around how do police officers respond to a mental health crisis? How do they identify? Part of it is just a basic mental health 101, going through the most common mental health challenges that they might run into in a call, but then how to effectively respond, what some language they can use. And then we also brought in other community resources so that they could put a face to some of the resources that they could turn to within that particular community, so that it didn't necessarily turn into an arrest, that there were other options that those officers feel like they could turn to. Because we know that with most mental health crises, police officers will be on the front line of those calls. So that's a couple of the things that we've got going on. And I think, as Senator Lovely mentioned earlier, we have expanded into colleges over the last couple of months, Salem State being one of the first ones, but we're hoping to get into Middlesex Community College as well. Just because if you've been following the news, there's been a huge uptick in suicides amongst college students, and that's something that we're trying to address here. I couldn't imagine being a freshman in college this year or a sophomore in college this year. You missed your senior year of high school and you're being thrown into this new environment. You got to find resources all on your own. It can absolutely be overwhelming. So that's another population that we are going to be starting to work with over the next year. So that's what I got for the NAM project. We are always open to new schools, new ideas. If anyone has any suggestions, a school district or a new project that we should be taking on, I'm always open to listening to that. I'm going to put my email address into the chat in case anyone wants to contact me. But if there's any other questions, happy to answer those as well.
Jake and John, I want to echo what Councilor Mercier said. I mean, it is just, obviously we've worked with you before. We're happy to be doing that again. It is incredibly impressive what both you and John have been able to do in terms of, it's one thing to be resilient enough to survive something as tragic as a loss yourself, but then to be able to take it and make it actually a positive is just so amazing. So thank you both. And in particular to John, it is not easy, obviously, to tell a story that personal, especially on Zoom in front of a group of people you don't know. So please know that we know there's a cost to talking about those things, but we're so grateful that you're willing to do that.
Well, thank you once again. We really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Anybody, any last questions, comments for Jake and John? All right, thank you both. I want to go back to a couple of other things from NAMI. This weekend is NAMI's walk. It's in Artisani Park in Brighton. And the purpose of the walk, obviously, is to raise the issue of stigma, fundraising money, and promoting awareness of mental health. There are 2 NAMI Central Massachusetts walking teams. It's going to take place in person this Saturday, May 21st from 9 to 2. There'll be bands and speakers, and we'll put out the link to that. And in other NAMI news, this is an important thing, and I'm sure we all know people who would benefit from this program. On Tuesday, May 24th, NAMI is going to offer its virtual basic course, which isn't given very often, and it is for parents and family caregivers of kids and adolescents with emotional and behavioral issues. And that is just such a large segment of our population right now. So again, registration is required, and Nora's going to put that in the chat as well. In addition, you know, we spend a lot of time here always thinking about the settings in which opioid overdose, overdose or the use of opioids takes place. And one of those that we have focused a lot on really is workplaces. And Marianne Medeiros was nice enough to give us the heads up that on Monday, May 23rd, there will be a 3-hour free webinar at UMass Lowell to address opioids in the workplace. It's virtual. It addresses the impact that it has, that the disorder has, various forms of prevention, including workplace injury prevention, as well as workplace and organizational support systems for those experiencing substance use disorder. It's intended really for everybody, employers, workers, and organizations impacted by the crisis. The presenters will be from TNEC, the City of Lowell Department of Health. It will include case studies, breakout activities, and large group discussions. And there's a link for that as well. You know, we've been doing a lot of work lately looking at things, as you remember last time, about the construction industry and places where you may experience either an overdose, there may be injury, or potential other harm that can result from the use of opioids in a workplace. Anybody else have thoughts or notices or programs they want to tell us about? Anything else that's happening? All right. We will see you all again on June 29th. We look forward to seeing people. Stay safe. Enjoy the beautiful weather. Thank you so much. Thanks to Nora as well. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.